Welcome to FM Talks. I want to start our time today by asking you to picture a very specific but perfectly ordinary scenario.
Okay.
It's a Tuesday night. You've just finished up the evening routine. The kitchen is spotless. The dishwasher is humming that quiet, that familiar hum.
The background noise of adult life.
Exactly. The kids, if you have them, are finally asleep. You've looked at the calendar for the rest of the week, and it is perfectly synchronized.
Everything is mapped out.
Everything. The finances are managed. The household is flowing with this incredibly predictable, well-oiled rhythm. And you and your partner are sitting on the couch together.
Right.
On paper, if anyone were to look at your life from the outside, everything is flawless. You're best friends. You are a highly efficient team managing the complex architecture of modern life. You're doing every single thing right.
But there's a catch.
There is, because as you sit there scrolling on your phone, maybe sharing a meme or a quick comment about a work email, there is this creeping realization that the romantic spark, that visceral electricity you used to feel in the early days, has quietly faded into a dial tone.
It is a profound sense of emptiness.
Mm.
And I think what makes it so difficult to process is how incredibly confusing it is.
It's so confusing because there's no obvious villain in the room with you.
Right. There has been no massive conflict. There's no betrayal. There is just this pervasive, comfortable quiet.
Yes, that comfortable quiet. You haven't had a real fight in months, but you also haven't felt a genuine thrill in months either. You manage life perfectly together, but you feel like, well, incredibly efficient roommates.
You love them, but you don't necessarily feel that magnetic pull toward them.
Exactly. And today we are exploring a resource that completely shifts how we understand this silent drift. It's a guide called Attraction and Tension from the Logic of Us series.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. I look at this almost as a blueprint for the underlying architecture of human connection. Our mission today is to unpack a remarkably counterintuitive idea. The possibility that your priority to make everything comfortable, safe, and constantly close, that might actually be the exact dynamic that is extinguishing your spark.
I was reading the opening section of this guide, and it completely changed how I view this roommate phase we all seem to accept as inevitable.
All right, we just assume it's what happens when you get older.
We do. But the guide introduces a concept called the fuse dynamic. If we look at our modern high-stress lives, the natural human instinct is to eliminate any source of friction. The world is chaotic enough, so when we come home, we want absolute ease.
We just want a safe harbor.
Exactly. And to achieve that, couples naturally begin to merge. They blend their schedules, their decision-making processes, their social lives, and even their private thoughts into a single, highly efficient unit.
They become one person, basically.
They do. They prioritize total transparency and constant communication to create a profound sense of safety. But the guide points out a brilliant, almost tragic irony in this pursuit.
Which is what?
By eliminating all the space, the mystery, and the distinct boundaries between you, you inadvertently sacrifice the natural tension that exists between two separate individuals.
And that tension is the spark.
That tension is the very definition of the spark.
That makes so much sense on a practical level, but it completely flies in the face of what we are constantly told to do.
It really does.
If a relationship feels distant, the universal advice is usually to push for more closeness. We're taught to work harder at it.
Lean in.
Right, lean in. If the spark is gone, we think we need to schedule a mandatory, heavily planned date night. Or we need to look into each other's eyes and ask, what are you feeling right now? Or find a new hobby to conquer side by side.
And the guide spends a lot of time addressing why that specific instinct, the urge to work harder by forcing closeness, is actually a trap.
Okay, I want to hear the logic behind this.
To explain this, it offers a conceptual framework for a relationship's vitality. Imagine your relationship is a car traveling down a long road.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
In the trunk of that car, you have the heavy load you have to carry, the stress of daily life, the endless chores, the unspoken resentments. That weight is always pulling you down.
The daily grind.
Exactly. But what actually powers the car forward? What is the fuel in the engine? The guide argues it is a combination of two distinct types of fuel.
Okay.
The first is your communication, which creates your safety and trust. The second is the spark, which is the mystery, the tension, the unknown. Now, here is the terrifying mathematical reality of how those two fuels interact. They multiply each other to create forward momentum.
Wait, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. You're saying the safety fuel and the mystery fuel, they don't just add together in the tank?
No, they don't just add up.
They act as multipliers for the overall vitality of the engine.
Precisely. And because it is a multiplier, if the spark, the mystery drops all the way to zero, the entire forward momentum of the engine becomes zero.
Wow. Because anything multiplied by zero is zero.
Exactly. You could have perfect communication. You could be the most transparent, honest logistics managing team on the planet. Your trust fuel could be at maximum capacity.
But without the spark, without that tension, the engine simply stalls, regardless of how well you communicate.
That is the core issue.
That is a massive realization. I'm thinking about how this translates to a busy Wednesday morning for the person listening right now.
How does that look in practice?
Well, you wake up feeling a bit disconnected from your partner. So to overcompensate, you text them 5 times throughout the morning. You send them a play-by-play of your commute.
Right.
You tell them about the annoying thing your boss just said. You are pouring all this incredible niceness and transparency onto the relationship. But if the spark is at zero, all that beautiful communication isn't actually moving the car forward.
The guide refers to this as the effort paradox. Pouring more and more closeness onto a relationship that lacks a spark is fundamentally identical to flooding a car engine with too much gas.
You just drown it.
You drown it. You are packing the emotional components of the relationship so tightly together that there is literally no physical or psychological space left for the ignition to happen. You suffocate the engine with the very fuel you thought would save it.
I want to pause here because I think there is an incredible amount of relief in what you just said.
How so?
If you are listening to this and nodding along, it means you are not failing because you don't love your partner. Your relationship isn't fundamentally broken.
No, not at all.
You are simply applying the wrong tool to the problem. You've been trying to fix a lack of desire by increasing comfort.
And desire and comfort require entirely different environments to thrive. You cannot cultivate them using the same methods.
So how do we cultivate desire then? What environment does it need?
The guide uses an absolutely brilliant physics metaphor to illustrate the environment desire needs. It's called the Leidenfrost effect.
The Leidenfrost effect. Okay.
Imagine you are standing in your kitchen and you drop a small splash of water onto a skillet that is just mildly warm. What happens?
It just sits there, spreads out, and evaporates into nothing.
Exactly. But consider what happens if that skillet is incredibly hot, well above the boiling point.
It sizzles.
It sizzles, but a completely different physical reaction occurs. A vapor gap forms. An incredibly thin, insulating layer of steam creates a microscopic physical distance between the water droplet and the hot metal.
Okay, I can picture that. The droplet kind of beads up.
Right, and because of that tiny gap, the water droplet doesn't evaporate. It skitters, it dances, it moves actively across the surface of the pan.
It stays alive, essentially.
Yes. The guide argues that relationships require this exact same vapor gap to maintain heat over the long term.
I love that visual. But I do want to push back a little here.
Please do.
Because the word gap can trigger a lot of anxiety. We're constantly told that secrets destroy relationships. The cultural narrative is that a healthy relationship means you have no walls, no boundaries, and total access to each other.
Total fusion.
Right, so how does the guide differentiate between a healthy vapor gap and just hiding things from your partner? Doesn't a gap imply distance, which implies coldness?
That is the most common fear, but the distinction is crucial. A vapor gap isn't about deception or hiding things that affect your partner's life or safety.
It's not about living a double life.
No, not at all. It is about preserving the structural boundary of your individuality. It's the difference between a cold pan where the water just sits flat and a hot pan where the boundary creates dynamic movement.
So the boundary is what creates the heat.
Yes, total transparency sharing, every fleeting thought, every mundane movement, giving them full access to your inner monologue at all times destroys that boundary.
And when the boundary goes, the heat goes.
When you have zero boundaries, the heat dissipates instantly. The engine stalls not from a lack of love, but from a lack of distance. And what is truly fascinating is that this isn't just a poetic metaphor about skillets and steam.
There's actual science behind this.
It is grounded in the literal neurochemistry of our brains.
Okay, I'm so curious about the biology behind this. Is our brain actually rewarding us for becoming these perfectly fused roommates? Or is there a physical reason we lose the spark when we get too close?
If we look at fMRI, brain scans of people in long-term relationships, we can see a neurochemical conflict playing out in real time.
A conflict between what?
The human brain utilizes two very different chemical setups for love and connection. First, you have oxytocin.
The cuddle hormone.
Exactly. This is the bonding chemical. It is the comfort chemical. Structurally, if you look at it under a microscope, it has a rounded interlocking shape. It is biologically designed to make you feel safe, merged, and at peace.
So oxytocin is the chemical equivalent of a warm, heavy blanket on a Sunday afternoon.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
It's what you feel when you're watching a movie on the couch together. Totally relax.
Precisely. It is essential for long-term attachment. But then you have dopamine.
The reward chemical.
Dopamine is the desire chemical. It is the anticipation chemical, the core of the brain's reward and seeking drive. Dopamine has a sharp, angular, seeking structure.
So it's not rounded and cozy at all.
No, it requires a gap. It requires a mystery to solve, a goal to chase, something slightly unknown to pursue. You cannot trigger the seeking drive of dopamine if you are already securely wrapped in the warm blanket of oxytocin.
Because you biologically cannot crave what you already fully possess and can predict with 100% certainty.
That is the absolute core of the tension. Your brain's reward loop literally shuts off its search signal because there's nothing left to discover about the person sitting next to you.
Let's apply this to how we actually live our lives right now. Think about the modern couple.
The daily habits.
Right. We share our phone passwords. We track each other's locations on digital maps just for convenience. We text each other every incredibly mundane detail of our day.
I'm in line for coffee.
Traffic is bad on the highway. I just had a boring salad for lunch. By doing this, by providing a constant, uninterrupted stream of data, we effectively turn our partners into something as predictable as a piece of furniture in our living room.
We downgrade them from a fascinating, complex, separate human being into predictable background noise.
We really do. And I want to validate how frightening it feels to recognize that and try to change it.
It goes against everything we're taught.
It does. When you feel disconnected from someone you love, the idea of stepping back, the idea of intentionally stopping the oversharing, feels like you are abandoning the relationship.
It feels risky.
It feels incredibly counterintuitive, like you're purposely being cold. But understanding this biology, seeing the difference between the warm blanket of oxytocin and the hunt of dopamine, shows us why stepping back is absolutely necessary.
You have to create the space.
Your partner's brain needs a break from knowing every single thing about you so it can feel curiosity again.
It requires a complete shift in perspective. It isn't about being distant or playing games. It is about reestablishing the environmental conditions necessary for attraction to survive.
And if we don't do this, what happens if we just keep coasting on oxytocin?
If we look at the bigger picture, ignoring this dynamic has a very specific, predictable timeline. The guide references some fascinating longitudinal data from Dr. John Gottman.
He's the renowned relationship researcher, right?
Yes. He studied couples who are highly conflict avoidant, the ones who prioritize perfect peace and complete fusion over passion.
Did he have a timeline for this? Like, how long can a couple realistically coast on this peaceful roommate dynamic before the engine totally dies and someone realizes they are deeply unhappy?
He found they face a highly predictable decay cycle of roughly 16.2 years.
16 years, wow.
And what makes this so dangerous is that the relationship doesn't end in a sudden catastrophic explosion or a massive betrayal. It is a slow, silent leak.
Because there's no fighting, there are no warning bells ringing.
Exactly. The dashboard lights all look green. The couple simply mistakes the silence of a stalled engine for the peace of a healthy relationship.
They think they're doing great because they aren't arguing.
Right. They coast on this apathetic stability for over a decade and a half until the internal energy is just gone.
That is terrifying. It's what I always think of as the friend zone trap.
The friend zone trap.
You perfectly mirror each other, you never argue because you've smoothed over all your rough edges, but you exist in a complete platonic flatline. You've traded all your individual polarity for mutual safety.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it. Polarity traded for safety.
So if a listener is sitting there thinking, oh no, this sounds exactly like my life, how do we diagnose this? How do we know if we are currently in this trap?
The guide offers a brilliant diagnostic tool called a resonance audit to help identify the daily habits of fusion.
Okay, I want to hear these.
These are the subtle red flags indicating that your vapor gap has completely collapsed. The first, and perhaps most common, is called micro-choice stagnation.
Oh, this is so incredibly real. Let me paint a picture and you tell me if this is what the guide means.
Go for it.
It's Friday night. You're both exhausted. Someone asks, what do you want to do for dinner? The other person says, I don't know. What do you want?
The classic deadlock.
I'm good with whatever. Maybe Thai. We had Thai last week. What about Italian? Sure, if you want Italian. You spend 45 agonizing minutes trying to pick a takeout order in a movie because neither of you will just plant a flag and make a choice.
You completely lose the ability to make a tiny, insignificant decision without launching a joint committee.
Exactly.
That is the perfect example. Every single decision, no matter how trivial, is filtered through a mandatory we consciousness.
A we consciousness.
The cognitive load of simply deciding what to watch on a streaming service becomes astronomically high because both partners are constantly deferring to the other. You're terrified of making a choice that might cause a ripple of dissatisfaction.
You completely lose your individual directional momentum.
Yes. You stop being a person with distinct tastes and become a focus group of two.
It is incredibly exhausting. The mental load of constantly consulting someone else for tiny choices drains your daily energy. It feels like you are walking through molasses just to get through a weekend.
It's a massive energy sink.
What is the next red flag we should look for in this audit?
The second flag is identity blurring. This happens when you willingly give up your individual areas of expertise to engage almost exclusively in beginner-level shared activities.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Let's say you are an advanced, passionate solo hiker. You've been doing it for years. It's part of who you are. But you slowly give that up, entirely replacing it with gentle, paved trail walks with your partner, simply because you feel you should be spending that time together.
Or you've played the piano beautifully since childhood, but you let it gather dust in the corner so you and your partner can take a beginner pottery class together on Saturday mornings.
Right.
Because doing things together is supposed to be the ultimate goal of a good relationship.
Yes, and the hidden tragedy of identity blurring is that the partners never get to witness each other being truly masterful.
Oh, that's sad.
Attraction requires an audience. It requires a vantage point. If you are always participating in the exact same activities side by side, struggling through the same beginner steps, you never get the opportunity to stand across the room and admire your partner in their element.
You never see them completely separate from you, displaying competence and confidence.
Absolutely.
You lose the ability to actually see them. If someone is always standing shoulder to shoulder with you, they are in your blind spot.
You have to step back to take them in.
You really do. And I imagine the third red flag ties right into this loss of individuality.
It does. The third habit of fusion is the presence of privacy deficits.
Privacy deficits.
This is rooted in the deeply ingrained cultural belief that true, pure love means having absolutely zero private thoughts.
The idea that we must share everything.
It is the assumption that a healthy relationship requires you to completely merge your digital footprints, your social silos, and your inner monologues. You feel obligated to share every observation, every minor grievance, every passing idea.
We do this because we think we are building a brand to our partner, but really we are just short-circuiting the whole architecture of desire.
The mystery fuel is completely depleted.
So if we take all of this, the micro choices, the identity blurring, the lack of privacy, what does this mean for the woman listening who feels completely drained by this roommate dynamic?
It means she needs to reclaim her space.
It means that reclaiming your own individual identity, stepping back into your own expertise, and allowing yourself to have private thoughts is not a selfish act.
Not at all.
It is actually a profound gift to the relationship. It is the only structural way to restart the engine.
Which brings us to the most important part of this discussion, the practical application.
How do we actually rebuild the gap?
Right. When couples finally realize they have lost the spark and recognize this fusion, a massive wave of panic usually sets in.
Of course, it's scary.
And their first instinct is to execute what the guide calls the grand gesture fallacy. They think the solution to their profound disconnection is to plan a massive, wildly expensive luxury vacation.
They book a week in a remote cabin or a tiny island in the Maldives. Just the two of them.
Because the narrative is, we just need to get away from the kids and the jobs and reconnect. We need to stare at each other for 7 days straight.
But if we look at the mechanics we just discussed, the neurochemistry and the effort paradox, we can clearly see why this grand gesture almost always fails spectacularly.
It's the worst thing you can do.
You're taking a relationship dynamic that is absolutely desperate for space, a dynamic that is actively suffocating from too much fusion, and you are forcing even more uninterrupted proximity onto it.
168 hours of mandatory synchronized closeness.
It is quite literally pouring a massive bucket of water on a tiny struggling ember and wondering why it didn't turn into a bonfire.
Exactly.
So if the grand gesture is a trap, What is the alternative? How do we build that gap back into a regular Tuesday?
The guide suggests something much smaller, much quieter, and infinitely more powerful. It advocates for the creation of tiny, consistent sovereignty rhythms.
Sovereignty rhythms. I love that phrasing.
These are atomic habits of independence, 2-minute acts that begin to gently separate the merged identities.
Let's make this highly actionable and craft what we can call the Saturday setup for our listener.
Let's do it.
This is a way to apply this insight today without blowing up your life, initiating a massive argument, or spending $10,000 on a vacation.
Start small.
Starting this weekend, pick one solo silo. Reclaim a hobby, a long walk, a specific podcast, or a book that is yours alone. Go to a local coffee shop by yourself for an hour just to sit and think.
And when you engage in that solo silo, there is one crucial rule you must follow.
What's the rule?
Do not report back.
Yes, this is the hardest part.
It's incredibly difficult.
When you come home from that coffee shop, do not give your partner a play-by-play of the golden retriever you saw on the patio, the specific latte you ordered, and the interesting thoughts you had while reading your book.
Keep it to yourself.
You have to create a small, intentional boundary of structural privacy. Let your partner wonder what you were thinking about. Let them ask you.
You have to give their brain's dopamine drive a mystery to solve.
You have to give them the space to be curious about you again.
Now, as you implement this Saturday setup, the guide offers a vital warning about the necessity of profound patience.
Patience is key here.
It describes a transitional phase called the Valley of Despair. To explain this phase, it uses an ice cube metaphor that I found incredibly helpful for managing expectations.
An ice cube metaphor.
Imagine you have a solid ice cube sitting in a freezer at minus 10 degrees. If you take it out and apply a gentle, consistent heat to it, the internal temperature of that ice cube will begin to rise.
Okay.
It will go from minus 10 to minus 5 to minus 2 to minus 1 degree.
But visibly, to the naked eye, it still looks exactly like a solid block of ice. It hasn't melted yet.
Exactly the point. Energy is being absorbed, change is absolutely happening at a molecular level, but from the outside, it looks completely unchanged.
And the dynamic of a relationship works the exact same way.
It does. When you start claiming your space, establishing these tiny sovereignty rhythms, and holding back your constant stream of communication, your partner's emotional reaction might not change immediately.
You might not see the spark miraculously reignite on day 2.
And that is exactly where the panic sets in for so many of us.
We think, well, I went for a walk by myself on Saturday and I didn't text him and he didn't immediately ravish me when I walked in the door, so this clearly isn't working.
The experiment failed.
Right. The relationship is dead. I better go back to checking his location and texting him all day so I feel safe again.
But you cannot abandon the new rhythm just because the ice hasn't visibly melted. You have to wait for the internal temperature to reach 0 degrees.
You have to hold that vapor gap open long enough for the engine to actually warm up.
You are waiting for what the guide calls spontaneous initiative.
Spontaneous initiative.
That beautiful moment when your partner naturally reaches out to you with genuine, unprompted curiosity. It will happen, but only if you have the discipline to maintain the space.
I find this entirely freeing. If you are listening to this, you don't have to fix your entire relationship this weekend with an exhaustive, tear-filled 3-hour marathon talk about the state of the union.
Those talks rarely help.
Those heavy talks usually just amplify the noise and the anxiety anyway, creating more pressure. You don't need to apologize for wanting a little distance.
You simply have to quietly, calmly, and confidently reclaim your own center of gravity.
You just have to remember the fascinating, distinct person you were before you merged into a highly efficient team.
It is about shifting away from an emotional panic reaction and moving toward intentional structural design.
You're quietly changing the architecture of your days so that desire finally has the physical and psychological room to breathe.
You are giving the fire the oxygen it needs.
As we wrap up this conversation, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day, maybe as you finish your commute or fold the laundry.
It's a powerful thought.
We are conditioned to believe that love means constant presence. But what if the most deeply romantic, loving thing you can possibly do for your partner today is not to lean in closer?
What if it's the exact opposite?
What if the greatest act of love is to intentionally step back, rediscover your own fascinating separate world, and finally give them the profound gift of missing you?
That is a remarkably powerful shift in perspective. It changes the entire landscape of how we connect.
If you want to dive deeper into these ideas, the full guide is available on Amazon. You can find the link in our bio. It's a perfect deep dive for a quiet afternoon. Thanks for listening to FM Talks.